It has now been 6 days since the U.S. forces carried out a surprise nighttime raid in Venezuela, taking Nicolas Maduro and his wife into U.S. custody. This action has caught the Venezuelan government off guard, along with few members of the U.S. Congress. Trump's action has now sparked a response from the Capitol Hill. Yesterday, U.S. Senate moved to limit the president's ability to launch future military strikes against Venezuela. It also advanced a war powers resolution aimed at reasserting congressional authority over the use of force. And after two previous failed attempts, the measure cleared a key procedural vote by a narrow margin of 52 to 47. In fact, 5 Republicans broke with President Trump and joined all Democrats in support of the resolution. Those senators are Rand Paul of Kentucky, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Todd Young of Indiana, Josh Hawley of Missouri. Supporters of the resolution say the president acted without proper authorization and that any prolonged military action must be approved by the Congress under the War Powers Act. President Trump strongly criticized the Senate vote, saying that it undermines American self-defense and national security. He claims it impedes his authority as commander-in-chief. He also called the War Powers Act unconstitutional and publicly called out the Republicans who voted for the measure, saying that other GOP senators should be ashamed of them. Vice President J.D. Vance, meanwhile, addressed the defection, saying that he spoke with the Republican senators and that their arguments were based largely on legal and procedural concerns and not on disagreement with the president's policy towards Venezuela. Meanwhile, Trump says that he has cancelled a previously expected second wave of attacks on Venezuela, saying that the situation is now working well together between the two leaders. He is also expected to meet with the oil industry executives at the White House. This comes as his administration pushes companies to re-enter Venezuela and re-engage with its energy sector. Trump says he plans to meet the Venezuelan opposition leader next week. Remember, he previously questioned whether she had enough support to replace Maduro loyalists still in power. When Trump was asked whether the Venezuela strikes signal a broader foreign policy doctrine, he was blunt. He said, "This is not about ideology, but about stopping drugs from entering America." This year has just started and there is a new dating term out there already. Let's introduce you to a dating trend labeled chore-mance. Sounds a little odd, right? Let's tell you what this is about. It's basically a combination of the words chore and romance. And as the name suggests, it's a mix of chores and dating. How exactly though? It's pretty simple, actually. Instead of going out on traditional dates, you run errands together or you go to the gym, perhaps. Imagine going grocery shopping on a date instead of going out for, say, a fancy meal or for a movie. But what's behind the idea? In simple terms, to interact with the person and get to know them in a more authentic setting. And in a way, seeing what it's like to spend time with the person, doing basic, ordinary things as a part of your routine, see what they are really like and seeing how they fit in your real life. Also meaning that the person would be more casual, more real, and less uptight and more authentic. Getting to know the other person and seeing if there's a connection, not in the traditional ways, but while you run errands together. It could be a good icebreaker, and maybe if you are having a really busy week, it also makes it easier to fit that date into your schedule, and your chore is also taken care of, even if the date does not go well. So if you are planning a date for this weekend, maybe you could try and see if you want to meet them at a supermarket store instead of a cafe or a restaurant. Just some food for thought as we enter the weekend. The U.S. government has dropped clear daily limits on alcohol consumption in its newly released 2025 to 2030 dietary guidelines for Americans, marking a major shift after decades of fixed recommendations. For the first time since 1980, the U.S. federal guidelines no longer tell Americans to restrict themselves to 1 or 2 standard drinks a day. Instead, the updated advice urges people to drink less alcohol for better overall health and to limit alcoholic beverages. without setting numerical caps. The new guidelines also remove earlier warnings that alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer and other cancers. Earlier guidelines had cautioned that even moderate drinking could raise the risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and premature deaths. These guidelines often shape medical counseling, school meal programs, and public health policy across the United States. In fact, health researchers have long used the government's drinking limits as benchmarks in clinical studies. And to define moderate versus heavy drinking, the revised guidance does advise the certain groups to avoid alcohol entirely, of course, and that includes people who are pregnant, those with alcohol use disorder, and individuals taking medications that interact with alcohol. It also tells people with a family history of alcoholism to remain mindful of their drinking and addictive behaviors. But the guidelines do not separate recommendations for men and women, despite differences in how they metabolize alcohol. They also do not include a specific warning against underage drinking. And this policy change comes as alcohol use declines across the United States. Very interestingly, a Gallup poll showing only 54% of U.S. adults now say that they drink alcohol, down from 62% in 2023. And more than half of the Americans also believe even 1 or 2 drinks a day harm health. More than double the share who held that view in 2011. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.